Laughter and music filled the hall as the wedding reception buzzed with energy. But all eyes suddenly turned when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "There she is. I told you not to wear red." Rachel's voice cracked with anger as she pointed at her younger sister, Avery. Guests turned to look. Avery stood frozen in a long red dress, confused. She hadn't meant to upset anyone. It was just a dress. But in their family, red at a wedding was seen as disrespectful, even shameful. The wedding planner and a couple of guests approached her quickly, whispering that she had to leave. Avery tried to explain, her voice shaking, but Rachel didn't care. "You've embarrassed me enough," she said through clenched teeth. "Get out." Avery looked around helplessly. Her eyes landed on Daniel, the groom, who stood silently near the bar. Their eyes met. For a second, it felt like time stopped. His face wasn't angry, it was something else. Sad? Surprised? It was hard to tell, but he didn't say a word. He just looked at her, then turned away. Avery's throat tightened. She couldn't believe this was happening. Her sister hated her enough to throw her out on her wedding day. And Daniel, her childhood friend, the boy who once used to sneak her snacks at family dinners and tell her jokes to make her laugh, didn't even try to stop it. Someone gently took her arm and guided her toward the exit. The doors closed behind her with a quiet thud. Outside, the sky had started to drizzle. She stood alone, heels sinking into the wet grass, watching the party go on without her. Through the glass, she saw Rachel laughing, Daniel talking to someone, and everyone dancing like nothing happened. Avery's heart felt heavy. This wasn't just about a red dress. It was about being unwanted, about being the outsider. She wrapped her arms around herself, not sure if it was from the cold or just the pain. She had come to support her sister. She had hoped to feel like part of the family, even if just for one night. But now, standing in the rain, she realized something. She had never really belonged. Growing up, Avery always felt like the second choice. Rachel was the golden child, the one who got straight A's, who made varsity cheer, who their parents praised at every family dinner. Avery, on the other hand, was quieter, softer. No matter what she did, it never seemed enough. Teachers, neighbors, even relatives would say, "Why can't you be more like Rachel?" Over time, Avery stopped trying to compete. She started fading into the background. The sisters were never close. Rachel was always too busy, too focused on her perfect image. Avery wanted a real connection, but every attempt was either ignored or mocked. Their relationship grew colder as they got older, and by the time Rachel got engaged, Avery was barely more than an obligation. In her personal life, Avery didn't feel much different. She had been dating Matt for 3 years. He was nice, stable, and everyone thought he was good for her, but she felt alone even when he was sitting right next to her. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't see when she was hurting. They had grown used to each other, not close. Then there was Daniel. He and Avery had been friends since they were kids. He saw her in ways no one else did. They had long talks, inside jokes, quiet support. She used to wonder what it would be like if he looked at her the way he looked at Rachel, but he never did, at least not that she noticed. So she tucked her feelings away, believing it was just a childish dream. But what Avery didn't know was that Rachel was hiding something too, a big financial problem, one that could ruin her and Daniel's future. Rachel knew Avery had gotten too close to the truth, and pushing her out of the wedding was easier than facing her own mess. That night, after the wedding, Avery couldn't sleep. Her mind kept playing the scene over and over. Rachel yelling, the guests staring, Daniel standing still. She needed air, so she drove to a quiet overlook outside town, a place she and Daniel used to visit as kids. It was peaceful, empty, or so she thought. She parked the car and stepped out, only to hear voices nearby. She paused, recognizing one instantly. It was Daniel. He was sitting with his best man, talking quietly. She was about to leave, not wanting to intrude, when she heard her name. "I shouldn't have let it happen," Daniel said, his voice low. "The dress thing, throwing her out like that. I just stood there. You were stuck between them," the best man replied. "Rachel's your fiancée," Daniel laughed bitterly. "Yeah, but I've been in love with Avery for years. Since we were what, 17? Maybe younger." Avery froze. Her breath caught in her throat. "I never told her," Daniel continued. "She was with Matt, and Rachel, she's always been controlling. I didn't want to make things worse between them. I told myself it was just a crush, that it would pass, but it never did." The best man was silent. Daniel sighed. "It's too late now anyway. I'm married. I can't undo any of it. Avery stumbled back, tears filling her eyes. She didn't hear the rest. She rushed to her car and drove away, heart pounding. All this time, she had loved Daniel quietly, secretly, and he had loved her too. And yet neither of them had spoken a word. He had chosen her sister. Let her be humiliated. Let her walk away. She felt dizzy, like her whole life had been a lie. She had been blaming herself for not being good enough, for being invisible. But he had seen her. He had felt something. He just didn't fight for her. And Rachel, how could she marry someone who had feelings for her sister? Did she know? Was that why she pushed Avery out? Avery's world spun with questions and hurt. She didn't know who to be angry with. Daniel for his silence, Rachel for her betrayal, or herself for still caring. All she knew was this: nothing would ever be the same. Avery didn't leave her apartment for days. After hearing Daniel's confession, she drove home in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Once inside, she turned off her phone, shut the blinds, and curled up on the couch under a blanket, still in her dress from the wedding. She didn't cry at first. She was too numb. She didn't eat much. She didn't speak. She barely moved. Matt called. He knocked on the door. He even left flowers. But she couldn't open it. She couldn't face him. Not now. Not after realizing she had been living a lie with him, just like everything else in her life. He had never really seen her, and the worst part was, she had let it happen. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Daniel's voice. I've been in love with Avery for years. How could he say that now? After standing there, watching her be thrown out, doing nothing, how could he marry Rachel if he had felt that way? And Rachel, her sister, the girl who used to braid her hair when they were little, who would scold her for stealing her clothes, but still let her borrow them. How had they come to this? When did it get so bad that Rachel would rather push her out than speak to her? Avery didn't know who to trust, or who she was anymore. Her apartment felt like a prison. The silence was loud. The memories were louder. She thought of her parents, always praising Rachel, of Matt, always trying, but never quite reaching her, of Daniel, always close, but never hers. The guilt hit her in waves. She had been with Matt for 3 years. She had smiled through dinners, vacations, and lazy Sundays. And all the while, part of her had been dreaming of someone else. That wasn't fair to him, but ending things felt like failing again. Another broken piece in a life already falling apart. Then her phone lit up, a text from Rachel. We need to talk, please. Avery stared at it. Her chest tightened. What would she say? Sorry for wearing red? Sorry for existing? She turned the phone over and dropped it on the couch. She sat in the quiet. The longer she sat, the more the truth began to sink in. She had spent years trying to fit into roles that weren't hers. The perfect sister, the loyal girlfriend, the peacekeeper. But none of it had made her happy. None of it felt real anymore. For the first time in her life, Avery realized she didn't know what she wanted. She only knew it wasn't this. Not this life. Not this pain. Not this silence. She got up and stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She didn't recognize herself, but somewhere inside, something had shifted. This wasn't about Daniel or Rachel anymore. This was about her, about facing herself, the version she'd buried under years of trying to be enough. She didn't know what the next step would be, but she knew this. She couldn't keep living like this. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. Avery decides she can't keep living in sadness and confusion. She's tired of feeling small, tired of letting others control how she sees herself. For the first time, she wants to do something that's hers, something that means something. She remembers a story her dad once told her years ago about a piece of land their family had owned. It was sold under strange conditions, and now it's where the wedding venue stands. That thought keeps buzzing in her head. Maybe this is her way forward, not for revenge, but for closure, for truth, for herself. She reaches out to Laurie, a childhood friend she hasn't seen in years. Laurie is a lawyer now, smart and sharp, and still as kind as Avery remembers. They meet at a coffee shop. Avery is nervous, unsure if this even makes sense. I need help, she says. Not with Daniel, not with Rachel, with myself. Laurie listens quietly as Avery explains everything. The land, the family history, the wedding venue, and how something doesn't feel right. Laurie nods and agrees to look into it. She even finds an old document that shows the land was never legally transferred. Avery's name, it turns out, should have been on that paperwork. It hits Avery hard. She had let her family ignore her for years. But this was something that legally belonged to her, something real, something no one could take away. At the same time, Daniel reaches out. He sends a message. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. I didn't know how." She doesn't answer, not at first. She needs space. She needs to focus on herself. But the message stays on her phone, unread but not deleted. Days pass. Avery and Laurie work together, building a case. They talk to the city. They pull public records. Avery feels stronger every day, like she's finally doing something that matters. She's scared, yes, but also awake. For the first time in a long time, Daniel shows up at her apartment one evening. He doesn't expect her to forgive him. He just wants her to know that he meant what he said. He tells her he loved her, that he still does. But he understands if it's too late. Avery listens, but she doesn't cry this time. She doesn't beg for answers. She looks him in the eye and tells him the truth. "You hurt me," she says, not just by saying nothing, but by waiting until it didn't matter anymore. He nods. He deserves that. "I'm not saying this to make you feel bad," she adds. I need to be honest. With you. With myself." Daniel asks if there's a chance. She doesn't answer right away, because right now, her heart is still healing. And before she can be with anyone, she needs to be whole on her own. Later that night, she sits with Laurie again, paperwork spread out in front of them. Avery smiles, tired but proud. "This feels like mine," she says quietly. "It is," Laurie replies. "It always was." And in that moment, Avery feels something she hasn't in a long time. Hope. She may not have all the answers, but she's finally choosing her own path. Not Rachel's, not Daniel's. Heron. Avery fights for justice over the land dispute. With Laurie's help, she files the paperwork and takes the case to court. It quickly becomes clear that Rachel and their parents had known more than they ever admitted. The venue had been built on family land, but years ago, the deed had been quietly transferred without Avery's knowledge. She should have had a legal claim to it, but Rachel and their parents had signed everything behind closed doors. In court, Avery sits across from her sister, heart pounding. Rachel avoids eye contact, but Avery doesn't flinch. For the first time in her life, she's not backing down. She listens as the lawyers speak, as documents are shown, as Rachel is questioned. The truth spills out piece by piece. Rachel knew Avery's name was on the original deed, and she chose not to tell her. She used that land to cut a deal for the venue, covering up the change with forged paperwork and quiet bribes. It wasn't just a mistake, it was betrayal. When Avery takes the stand, her voice shakes at first, but she grows steadier with every word. "I've spent most of my life feeling invisible," she says. "This land was a part of my family, and I was pushed aside like I didn't matter. But I do matter, and I'm not going to stay silent anymore." The judge rules in Avery's favor. She's awarded her legal share of the property and compensation. It's not just about the money, it's the fact that she stood up and won. It's hers, and no one can take that away from her. After court, Rachel finally speaks to her. Her voice is cold, flat. "You could have just let it go." Avery looks her sister in the eye. "I let go of too much already. Not this." Rachel turns and walks away. Whatever bond they had left is gone now. Broken. But Avery doesn't feel empty. She feels free. Later, Daniel comes to see her. He's pale, nervous, but honest. "I ended it," he says. "With Rachel. It should have happened a long time ago. I couldn't keep pretending." Avery doesn't answer right away. She's not the same girl who would have begged for his love. She's stronger now. She's not looking for someone to save her. "You hurt me," she says simply. "I know," Daniel replies, "and I'll spend as long as it takes to make it right, if you'll let me." For the first time in weeks, Avery smiles. Not because of Daniel, but because of herself. She's no longer lost, no longer waiting. She won, and she's finally choosing her own future. At the final family gathering, Avery and Daniel face each other for the first time since the courtroom battle. It's a small backyard get-together at their parents' house. Quiet, tense, and heavy with things unsaid. The family tries to act normal, but everyone feels the shift in the air. Daniel finds Avery standing near the edge of the yard, away from the others. She's watching the wind move through the trees, calm but guarded. When he walks up, she doesn't look at him right away. "I've been wanting to talk to you," he says softly. She nods. I figured. I never wanted to hurt you, he says. Not back then, not now. I made mistakes. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I was scared, and I let you down. Avery takes a breath, then finally looks at him. You did, she says honestly. But I've made mistakes too. I stayed in a life that didn't fit me. I kept hoping people would change, but I never stood up for myself. Until now. Daniel's eyes search hers. So, where do we go from here? She pauses. I don't know, but I'm not shutting the door. Forgiveness? It's not easy, but I'm open to figuring it out. It's not a promise, but it's real. A few minutes later, Rachel approaches, alone. She looks tired, not from the weather or the day, but from everything. She stands in front of Avery, uncertain. I'm sorry, Rachel says, voice low. Not just for the wedding, for all of it, for how I treated you, for ignoring you, for pretending you didn't matter when you always did. Avery listens, not interrupting. I don't expect you to forgive me, Rachel continues. I wouldn't if I were you, but I needed to say it. There's a long pause. I'm not ready to forget, Avery says, but maybe this is a start. Rachel nods, tears brimming. It's not a hug or a reunion, but it's something. As the sun begins to set, Avery stands quietly, feeling lighter. The pain is still there, but it doesn't control her anymore. She looks out over the yard, her family, her choices, her future. She's no longer waiting to be seen. She sees herself now, and that changes everything. Avery stands alone on the small balcony of her new apartment. It's modest, with second-hand furniture and mismatched curtains, but it's hers. The evening air is warm, and the sky is painted in soft shades of orange and gold as the sun begins to set. She leans on the railing, breathing in slowly, feeling something she hasn't felt in a long time. Peace. She thinks about everything that's happened. The wedding, the betrayal, the truth about the land, the quiet confessions, and the things still unresolved, like Daniel. He's in her life again, gently, carefully. They've talked a few times since the gathering. Nothing rushed, no big promises. For once, Avery isn't waiting to be chosen. She's choosing herself. She looks down at her hands, remembering how tightly she used to clench them, always bracing for disappointment, for judgment, for pain. But now her hands are open, relaxed. She's not afraid anymore. Her phone buzzes with a text. It's Daniel, thinking of you. Hope today felt good. She smiles, but doesn't reply right away. She slips the phone back into her pocket and continues watching the sunset. For the first time, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. She doesn't know exactly what's coming next, but she knows she'll meet it head on, not as the overlooked sister, not as someone's second choice, but as herself. Avery closes her eyes, lets the breeze brush against her skin, and smiles. She's free, and she's ready. True strength comes from choosing yourself, even when others don't. Healing begins when you stop waiting for approval and start standing in your own truth.